My relationship with Halo's TV show feels like an abusive relationship where every single time there is a glimmer of, "Hey, maybe this isn't sucking," or "Hey, this is pretty good," the show proceeds to trample my fragile Halo-loving heart. Okay, it's not that fragile. At this point, it's a grizzled war veteran, considering, well... But that said, I set out a challenge for myself. It is one thing to just shout from the rooftops, "I dislike the writing of insert thing here!" That's not productive, and I've done it enough. A question I have received is, how would you do it? Or, you tried doing it. So you know what? Alright, I'll do it. I'm going to rewrite the Halo TV show, specifically Season 2. I know that seems weird, but given Season 2 is currently still rolling out episodes, and I lost hope for it about 4 episodes in after running out of copium, I figured I should work with that, because quite frankly, if there's one single phrase to describe this season, it is bundle of missed opportunities and unlearned lessons. It didn't have to be this way. The show could have course corrected. Season 1, on the other hand, was, in my blunt assessment, a travesty of character assassination, thematic strangling, and completely botched world building, not to mention the direct words of some of the showrunners at the time were full of blatant disrespect for the source material, which is never a good sign for an adaptation with very rare exceptions. So, logically, you would want to start with Season 1, right? Well, yes, but again, that's not why I'm choosing Season 2. I'm trying to demonstrate that Season 2 didn't need to be this way. A general guiding philosophy I have when it comes to, well, writing a canon is that at the end of the day, previous works happened, and in the case of a canon as young as the Silver Timeline, you can't sweep old, cringy stuff under the rug like, say, a multi-decade franchise such as Warhammer 40,000 can. Season 1, to draw on that 40k analogy, is basically the Inquisitor Draco book, but Halo, and unlike Draco and early 40k, which are satire, this takes itself seriously, or tries to, but 40k doesn't acknowledge, address, or even at this point consider the old Draco book canon. We can't do that with Halo Season 2, but we can salvage the show. I believe in bringing out potential, what was done right that can be expanded on, what was a cool idea that was just executed poorly, what went wrong so we can learn from it. As an example, much as I love the Star Wars prequel trilogy for nostalgia's sake, it was full of flaws and rightly received a lot of criticism. But from those prequels, we got amazing stories, novels, shows, some of which themselves started off shaky. I mean, look at Star Wars The Clone Wars, the 3D one, not the Chad 2003 one. I loved The Clone Wars growing up, and I still do, but its first movie and opening seasons were really, well, hit and miss at times. And yet, Clone Wars ended with one of the most spectacular finales the franchise has ever seen, and to be honest, it personally remains my favorite and a guiding beacon of aspiration. So as much as I vehemently despise everything this show is, I don't want it to fail. I never did, as angry as it makes me, as infuriating as it is for someone who has grown up on Halo, whose life has literally been changed by Halo. I don't want it to fail. A big pitfall that people tend to fall into, especially in the Halo community these days, is that folks get more enveloped in just hating the material rather than actually trying to see the material improve. It gets to a point where it's no longer about wanting the media to be better, and it's rather just about wanting to see it fail so they can then proceed to condemn it for failing, even if the people in question don't realize that's what they're doing. So the goal of this video and the following videos is not to just continuously rag on the show. I have done that plenty, and there will be plenty of that in this series. But I want to illustrate that Season 2 didn't need to be this way. And remember, everything here is subjective. People can disagree with me. So with that in mind, let's start understanding exactly what went wrong with Season 1. Before we can get into the actual plot and characters, we need to do some damage control in a key area: world building. More specifically, we need to break down exactly what went wrong with Season 1's world building so we can try to fix it. My biggest and harshest criticism, beyond issues like characterization, has everything to do with world building. In any story like Halo, world building isn't just important, it's vital. Here's why world building, at least for me and other folks I know, serves as a means of grounding the story. It helps make things feel more real. It adds depth to perspectives and ideas. It can serve as a means of helping a writer solidify the motivations of characters in a way that helps the audience understand things. And for that matter, world building doesn't just need to be the most complex, in-depth thing. All you need to do with world building is have it make sense and remain consistent. That's really all there is to it. It is true that world building can go too far in the sense that it detracts from the story. A balance does need to be set. So world building can't happen independently of the story, but it can't strangle the story either, lest the writer restrict themselves. It needs to walk in step with the plot, be integrated into the plot. You determine what the story you are trying to tell is and build the world accordingly. And then, once you have built out that world, or in this case galaxy, you go from there. However, the setting, the realm you are building, can't be a slave to that plot, that story. It needs to ground the story, keep it level, keep it from going off the rails, or else you get the Halo TV show, where pre-established facets of the galaxy are disregarded or waved away for the sake of making the plot happen. But first, let's look at an example of simple but successful and effective world building. The opening cutscene of Halo Combat Evolved tells the player everything they need to know in just a handful of lines over the course of a couple of minutes. And from there, the games proceed to build off of that. The way it's presented, everything makes sense. Now, to be clear, Bungie wasn't a god at making lore. As a matter of fact, much of Halo's expanded lore was never even made by Bungie to begin with. It just had Bungie's name slapped on it. But Bungie was good at presenting things in a manner that makes sense and building off of itself. Bungie never forced the plot to happen despite its rule of cool philosophy, but generally speaking, things made sense. Why groups do what they do makes sense in the context of the presentation. Why characters speak or react a certain way with the context of their own personalities and the world at large. They're understandable. You can clearly draw a line from points A to B to C. Even though yes, especially with Bungie's lore, scrutiny does show flaws. It is a solid structure. It's a single body. The Halo TV show, on the other hand, doesn't do this. It forces the story to happen in a manner that is inorganic, sporadic, and doesn't work. It doesn't know what it wants to do. I've brought it up in the past many times. It's a key criticism I have of the show. And to highlight that, let's show how stupid the Covenant is here. Why? Because the Covenant makes no sense. Because the show doesn't know what to do with them, which is why the Coveys, the premier antagonists of Halo, are barely in it. Any reason we get for an action is either contradicted by another action or is very weak in the sense that it tries to hand-wave the reasoning away. It's almost like the show wants to push past the reasons because it knows if you ever stop to smell the roses, you'll find Papa Nurgle has left a gift for you on the petals. Ignoring the actual canon of Halo and just focusing on the show, we can see how barebones the Covenant really is. Season 1 opens with the Covenant massacring an encampment of insurrectionists and civilians. From here you can simply see, oh, the aliens are clearly indiscriminately killing humans. They obviously do not care about human beings, and one is gone considering they are going on a wanton murder hobo spree that will make D&D barbarians blush. This is supplemented by the fact that the insurrectionist compound held absolutely no strategic value. All the Coveys needed to do was continue their excavation, keep an eye on the innies, and get out in a timely fashion. They didn't need to throw themselves into a distracting slaughter against an enemy that quite obviously couldn't fight back. Yet they did. For more astute audience members, this reinforces the narrative that the Covenant is what it is, a genocidal coalition of aliens. For the average viewer, the blatant gunning down of children and the elderly paints a clear enough picture. And yet, not even 15 minutes later, we run into our first hiccup, Makee. Now again, ignoring Halo's canon, Makee could have been an interesting plot point, because this causes the audience to ask questions. Who is she? Why are the aliens tolerating a human? What is her motive? Furthermore, is it possible that the Coveys don't want to destroy all humans? Do they just want to conquer us? Or maybe there's a part of humanity that is in the Covenant and the rest of humanity is at war with them. Hopefully the show will answer this in a manner that makes sense, right? Right? No, this character, right here is the beginning of the complete unraveling of the Covenant and show as a whole. Not only are the Coveys tolerating her, she's allowed to mouth off to the prophets openly, is referred to with reverence even. They call her the Blessed One, and she is allowed to command Senghili, high-ranking ones at that. The excuse is, oh, they're using her, she's a tool. If that's the case, well, I have some questions. So, the Covenant is religious, right? It clearly has a religious mandate to find these MacGuffins, artifacts, and kill humans, right? Okay, so then wouldn't Makee just be kept a secret? Because then the Coveys under the prophets have a good reason to start asking some hard questions if they see her. If humans are vermin, how come the prophets have a human they call the Blessed One? How come the Blessed One can openly yell at the prophets? How come she can command Senghili? And come to think of it, if these relics are left to us by our gods, why can't we interact with them, but the vermin human can? Bear in mind, these are things that the canon of Halo actually took into account. In canon, the entire reason for the Covenant war happening in the first place, a lie. It was all over a lie. The Covenant was founded on the belief that Forerunner artifacts and relics are made by their gods, and that the relics are theirs to inherit by design. So when Truth, Mercy, and Regret discovered that the Forerunners were A, not gods, and B, humans were supposed to inherit the Forerunner tech, they decided, well, shit, if this gets out, the Covenant will fall apart, and we'll lose all our fancy riches and power. That can't do. Oh, I know. Let's get rid of the problem. Humans. Every single time the prophets needed a human for the Forerunner stuff, note who they surrounded themselves with. Only the most loyal, unquestioning servants. An arbiter in Halo Wars 1, gullible brutes in Halos 2 and 3, and in Halo 3, Truth says to Johnson, I admit, I need your help, but that truth dies with all the rest. Part of why the Great Schism happened in the first place was the prophets, namely Truth, were so fixated on maintaining the illusion that kept their power, they lost the plot and wound up undoing the Covenant themselves. So desperate were they that they started a 3-decade-long war which saw billions of casualties on both sides, the near total destruction of the galaxy at the hands of the Flood and Halo, and the destruction of the Covenant as a political body, even as Truth was infected by the Flood, strangled by Thelvadame, who ran a massive sword of plasma through him. Truth continued to sprout lies in a fit of psychotic rage. Yet in the show, Makee is just there. The entire Covenant seems to just accept. It isn't like it is specified that only the most trusted and loyal of the prophets know of her existence. No, she's there. She's out and about. There is no hiding her, and it just gets worse. Makee's backstory is that she was on a UEG-run planet where she was brutalized by the guards and saw the worst of humanity. And then the Senghili found her and brought her back to the prophets. There's a problem with this scene. In episode 1, we see the Covenant go out of its way to massacre an insignificant settlement of humans indiscriminately. And now, the Senghili, who mind you don't know the artifact they are looking for as a human, just mosey on through a giant city full of humans. Sure, they toss around a few folks, but they're not killing people en masse. They don't just come down and start destroying the city, finding Makee in the process. No, they just stroll through the city. And to make matters worse, episode 2 introduces us to Reth. Reth here was captured by the Covenant, where he was asked to make Forerunner relics work, implying that not only is Makee potentially not a one-off, there is a very open and not very secret operation where the Coveys are trying to find someone else like Makee. But then, a few episodes later, the Coveys glass a planet, once again, indiscriminately. So what's going on here? Are they conquering? Are they doing a good old-fashioned genocide? We have an antagonist faction with absolutely no defined end goal with the protagonist faction. They have no clear motive, no mode of operation behind find MacGuffins. Honestly, I can just title the video, Makee is so completely and utterly disastrous to this show that she is honestly the central cause of at least 6 in 10 problems. Why? Because it gets so much worse. Alright, let's skip ahead a little. Makee goes to infiltrate the UNSC. Not a surprise, I mean, we have pieces of media where the prophets will use underhanded tactics to trick humans and get information. As an example, the book Cole Protocol details how the Prophet of Truth used some jackals that he totally wasn't gonna murder later to distribute Covenant weapons to insurrectionists, with the goal of tracking those weapons to human planets that will be destroyed. But now, like a curse, Makee is making the UNSC look dumb by their virtue of existing because the plot needs her to exist. Hey, remember how at the start of Season 1, Oni had a function in the Master Chief's armor that could literally suffocate him, and they are so paranoid that they are willing to use that function to knock the Chief out before venting the atmosphere of a condor briefly to kill a single teenager? No, just me, because clearly the show forgot. We'll get to the plot of it later, but basically, Oni and the UNSC, who are characterized as super duper uber paranoid, are just eating rocks with the Makee. And by the way, before I continue, so remember how in previous videos I've emphasized research? And in my interview with Troy Denning, he literally emphasizes research when writing. So Makee is found by the Chief and pretends she is afraid, but some suspicious details a Spartan would notice, and if not a Spartan, Oni would. Her clothes are clean, she is clearly unharmed, has no signs of injury, and just dropped out of a pod as the Cubbies were leaving. And then she pretends to faint. But why did she faint? Is she concussed? No. Does she have an underlying health condition? No. Is she well fed? Quite clearly. They ran medical examinations on her. They would have found health conditions. They would have been able to see if there was something wrong with her. What, she passed out because she was dehydrated? Speaking of the medical staff, there's a scene where Makee threatens them, visibly, with a plasma nail knife thing. First of all, there's no way she'd be able to hide that. How, you might ask? Because in order to turn your nail into that knife thing, you need A mechanism to create plasma, B, a tiny shaped magnetic field to contain the plasma, C, a means to keep Makee's finger from literally boiling off because plasma is just that hot, and D, a means of generating enough power to supply all of that. Is it doable? Yeah, absolutely, but with technology so advanced and precise, the UNSC and Oni would notice that shit instantly. And even ignoring the fact that they overlooked that, somehow there are A, no cameras or sensors in Makee's room because nobody in security looked at her glowing nail on the feed and said, hey guys, something's wrong, and B, blind staff because everyone just somehow didn't see the glowing blue plasma on the hand of a woman standing in front of them. And then they proceed to let the unhinged, unstable Master Chief go on what amounts to a date with her. And that's when the unspeakable happens. The Master Chief, again, who has at this point, A, openly left their post to smuggle the child of a major insurrectionist off-world, B, almost killed Dr. Halsey twice, C, has routinely demonstrated a lack of impulse control so dangerous it can actually cost lives. I mean, he literally spent 20 seconds screaming into TeamCom, punching a half-dead elite instead of helping, you know, a potentially concussed Spartan. The show knows how to world build, but it refuses to stick to that structure because if it does, the plot can't happen. So either the plot has to change, the world has to change, or the plot carries on anyways, damn the narrative nonsense. The show picked option 3. And to be clear, I haven't even gone through every single problem regarding how the show forces the plot onwards, regardless of whether or not it makes sense. And sadly, this is a tradition Season 2 has continued, albeit to a lesser degree, but that's for another time. In the next video, we'll get into characterization and how the Halo TV show seems to be the Schrodinger's cat equivalent of character development. I want to really take my time to break down this show so I can understand it, and from there, I can try to fix it in Season 2. Remember, this is all about showing how it could have corrected itself even with Season 1. Of course, I also want you to bear in mind that this is all my opinion, an opinion I firmly believe now more than ever after watching every episode of the TV show multiple times, but an opinion nonetheless. If you disagree, that's fine. If you like the show, I can't stop you. Like what you like. That's your right. And that said, I will see you in the cosmos, friends. I need spicy water.